This college admission scandal is obviously noteworthy because of how large it is really, but there have been a number of other standardized test cheating attempts and successful ones as well over the years. In New York, where I'm based in Great Neck, Long Island, there was the case of a high school student taking the SAT for many other kids as well and getting paid thousands of dollars to do it, getting offered a boat, things like that. That eventually got busted. There's a 60 Minutes segment about it on YouTube that's pretty entertaining where he went in depth on that. Now, the LSAT, though, and other grad level exams have had their own cheating attempts as well. For the LSAT back in February 1997, two students met a third guy at a bar and paid him to go into the test center and steal a test booklet, then transmit the answers to them via pager in Hawaii. So they were based in California, and then they hired someone there. Then they flew to Hawaii to take the LSAT, and then took advantage of the time difference to get answers transmitted to them via pager. Remember, this is back in 1997. And so ever since then, the Law School Admission Council has banned any kind of electronics in the test center, whether it be a pager, a beeper, a cell phone, anything else like that. Overall, with test security, it's always an arms race. The Law School Admission Council hires a test security firm called Cavion, or Cavon, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Caveon. So there are testing security firms that go around to the College Board, Educational Testing Service, Law School Admission Council, because once again, of course, the stakes are so high with these standardized tests, given that it's just a simple single number you get in a single day, whereas, of course, your GPA you earn over the course of 4 years. And for law especially, I think it's incredibly important, given you have to go before the bar, you have to be admitted as a JD, you have to pass the character and fitness portion of that, and you have to disclose any disciplinary issues or criminal records before you even apply to law school. And so if you fail to disclose something, you could potentially go through 3 years of law school and then never be able to practice law. And of course, an LSAT cheating attempt is definitely going to be a big barrier. With that SAT example, the security was definitely too lax. And you'll see that in the 60 Minutes segment that the testing security folks, they're very concerned about this and they have to change things. But we saw from that case that the proctors at these high schools, they're not really looking very closely. They're kind of just smiling and nodding and waving people in without closely matching the photo to the person in front of them, or even making sure that the ID is a secure one. A high school ID with some simple laminate, anybody can do that. It's not as if it's a government ID where it's scanned and more serious. With the LSAT example, I think it was literally they paid someone to go into the room and steal the booklet. The person kind of ran out of the room. The proctor chases them down. The guy pulls a knife on the proctor. And of course, he ends up getting caught in the end. So I don't think there was anything they could have done to prevent that. But obviously, you're not going to get away with something like that. And these days, of course, with security cameras everywhere, I think it'd be pretty easy to track somebody down. The biggest scandal I can think of with the GRE is actually from test prep companies themselves, believe it or not. There's this big incentive, of course, to get your students the best scores possible, because then they thank the company and get business and such like that. But so what happened with the GRE is that they reuse a lot of test questions. It's computerized. They have a big database of them, but there was actually a very limited set of questions they were using. So they'd kind of give them again and again and again. So test prep folks could go in, memorize the questions, write them down the second they get outside, and then use them on their students to prepare them for future tests. Well, for the GRE, it was in a way. A lot of students will just cram these old questions. They walk in, and then, of course, they know the answers. And the GRE has since adjusted things so that that's not so easy to do anymore. But the funny thing with the LSAT now, actually, is that it's going from being administered 4 times a year to as many as 9 or 10 times a year going forward. And they're also digitizing it at the same time. And so, as you said, the LSAC, they make new questions every year. They've been releasing consistently 3 new exam forms per year. But now that they're going to be administering it much more frequently, they're not able to develop quite as many new LSAT questions as they used to meet the new demand. So as a result, they are actually, believe it or not, reusing a lot of old questions. What they'll do is they'll take the questions they administered overseas and give them to students in the US, or they'll take the exams that were administered to a Sabbath observer on a Monday and give them to someone on a future LSAT test date on a Saturday. But obviously, there is potential for abuse here. The GRE is new competition for law school admissions. For as far as I can remember, it's always been the LSAT is the exam for law school admissions, and the GMAT used to be the exam for business school admissions, but some business schools started taking the GRE to get more applicants, open the doors a bit wider, and law schools are now doing the same due to the recent decline in number of people applying to law school. Now, I don't think the GRE is a valid law school admission test. It's testing something very different, but LSAC, the LSAT makers, are reacting to this competition by trying to be more student-friendly with more frequent test administrations. So they're taking both. They're taking both. It started with, I think, University of Arizona was one law school that started accepting GRE scores in addition to LSAT scores. But then more recently, Harvard started doing the same. And once Harvard does something, then everyone down the line feels comfortable doing it as well. So it is spreading quite a bit. But it's really used primarily more for people with STEM backgrounds, at least among the top 14 law schools. Yeah, so like a master's or a PhD, typically maybe more humanities or more science, but definitely not law. Well, the funny thing is, as we both know, these nonprofit universities, they do tend to operate more like a business in certain ways. They do have their overhead to meet. They do have big administrative expenses. But the problem is that the LSAT has a strong demonstrated correlation with first-year law school grades, and the GRE hasn't really been shown to do quite the same. And there is a big investment students are making in the law school admission process, in going to law school. They're taking on massive debt, and you want to know these students are going to succeed in law school and then be able to pass the bar in the end. I do think the GRE will probably end up spreading to the majority of law schools because the American Bar Association doesn't really seem to be stopping it, and they have the incentive, of course, to cater to law schools and help them get more applicants. So I do think it will continue to spread, but I think the biggest problem will be for the lower tier law schools where they're taking people with GRE scores who couldn't do it on the LSAT, and then they are going to run into a problem down the line. So I think if this continues too far, I'm hoping the ABA or the federal government will step in because they do have an obligation to serve their students well. No, it really is a travesty. I think these students graduating with debt, not being able to pass the bar, and then of course, if there's an oversupply of lawyers, how do they hang out their own shingle and get some business? So I think that what we want to do is we want to just help people get the best LSAT scores possible, get into the best law school possible. And my goal, honestly, is to help students go to law school for free, or at least with massive scholarship money. And you do that by getting the best LSAT score possible because law schools want people with high LSAT scores because it helps them in the rankings as well. So I'm a full-time professional LSAT coach. I've been coaching the LSAT for over 10 years now. I started off just doing one-on-one with students here in New York, but then I built a website, LSAT blog, where I started sharing free LSAT advice on every aspect of the process as well as law school admissions. From there, I started selling some low-cost prep materials like books, video courses, and now I teach online group classes. I also run the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast. So any of your listeners on the podcast end of things can check it out on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and anywhere else pretty much. It's, again, the LSAT Unplugged podcast. I try to follow it pretty closely, especially the past couple of years. There have been so many changes. One thing we could talk about a little bit if you're interested is the testing accommodation side of things too. Honestly, I think that's the real scandal going on here. This college admissions scandal, that's happening high in the sky with the celebrities. But I think what's accessible to many more of the 1% families out there is they hire a doctor to give their kid an ADHD accommodation or something like that. The kid gets to go in, take the test with 50% extra time or double time, and law schools will not know that this applicant received accommodations. Their score is evaluated just the same as everybody else's. And of course, this is a tough issue because some people do deserve the accommodations, but I think there are many more that don't. Because it's not something like you can run some sort of scientific study. It really just is a doctor asking a student a series of questions or running them through a battery of evaluations. But these are things where it's very easy to move the dial in one direction or another. And I do think the timing is really important. It's kind of funny, actually. I heard from a student who took the LSAT yesterday on Saturday who took it in the same room as Malcolm Gladwell, the famous author. And Malcolm Gladwell has been known to actually critique the LSAT's time constraint a little bit. He thinks that you don't want a lawyer who works quickly. You want a lawyer who takes their time and determines things accurately. But I mean, you're an attorney, Justin. I'm sure you know, like your clients, especially if you're billing them by the hour, they want you to work efficiently. What you do on an exam is different from what you do in the real world. But at the same time, in terms of just what the LSAT is doing, what standardized tests do, whether it's the SAT or the LSAT, there will be future timed work in one's career, whether it's in college or in law school. And so if our goal is to get students to pass the bar for the law school side of things, we want to make sure they have the ability beforehand before they make that investment. And that's where the LSAT score comes in. With enough drive and putting in the work, you can achieve incredible results. And I guess on my end, looking at students taking the LSAT, a lot of them do start off with low discouraging scores, but it is possible through hard work, through self-study, to achieve significant score increases and get into top 14 law schools. I see it happen all the time. Again, my name is Steve Schwartz. I run the LSAT blog. I also host the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast. So go to youtube.com/LSAT blog or search the LSAT Unplugged podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and pretty much everywhere else.